On a busy street in New York, a black man hurried to an important job interview that could change his life. But when he came across a woman, exhausted and helpless by the side of the road, he chose to stop and help her fix her car, even though he knew for sure he would be late for the interview. While feeling hopeless for letting such a rare opportunity slip away, he suddenly received an offer, one that opened a door even greater than anything he had ever imagined, from the very woman he had helped the day before. The city hummed with restless energy as the evening traffic crawled forward, headlights casting fleeting reflections on the wet pavement. The air smelled of damp asphalt and exhaust, a mix of summer heat and the lingering aftermath of rain. Andre Lawson gripped the handlebars of his old motorcycle, weaving cautiously between the stopped cars. This was at the interview. He had waited months for this opportunity, had studied every angle of Lennox Company, memorized their annual reports, practiced answering every possible question. He wasn't just going in for another job. This was his shot at something real, something that could finally pull him out of the endless cycle of temporary gigs and being overlooked. The light flicked green, and he accelerated, eyes darting to the glowing numbers on his dashboard. 25 minutes. Enough time to park, check himself in, and walk into that interview looking like he belonged there. Then he saw her. A black Tesla sat motionless in the middle of the street, hazard lights blinking frantically. Traffic funneled around it, honks blaring as impatient drivers swerved past. But what caught Andre's attention wasn't the car, it was the woman standing beside it. She was tall, sharply dressed, with a crisp blazer that looked like it cost more than his rent. Her sleek, blonde hair framed a face that radiated power, except now. That face was tight with frustration, her phone gripped white-knuckled in one hand. She was stuck, and no one was stopping to help. Andre's hands tightened on the handlebars. Not his problem. He had somewhere to be. His mind screamed at him to keep going. This wasn't his fight. He'd been in this city long enough to know how things worked. A black man on a beat-up bike stopping to help a white woman in a luxury car. He could already imagine the suspicion in her eyes, the way her body would tense up the second he approached. If the roles were reversed, would she stop for him? The thought made something bitter rise in his throat. He should go. He should just go. 23 minutes. And yet he couldn't. With a sharp turn of the handlebars, Andre cut across the lane and rolled to a stop beside the Tesla. The woman's head snapped up, eyes narrowing the moment she registered him. There it was. That flicker of hesitation. That moment of calculation, weighing whether he was here to help or to take something from her. Andre forced himself to stay neutral, ignoring the way his chest burned at the look in her eyes. Car trouble. His voice was steady, as if he hadn't already predicted the reaction. For a beat, she said nothing. Her gaze flicked over him, the leather jacket, the calloused hands, the old bike parked too close to her pristine car. Her face hardened. "I've called roadside assistance," she said coolly, like she was trying to end the conversation before it began. Andre huffed a quiet laugh. Of course she had. He gestured toward the car. "You sure you want to wait? You're blocking the whole street." She pressed her lips together, as if the reality of her situation had just now fully set in. Her gaze dropped to her phone. No service. Her jaw tensed. Andre saw at the exact moment she realized she didn't have a choice. "It won't start," she admitted, like the words physically hurt her to say. He nodded, already stepping toward the hood. "Pop it." She hesitated again, like the idea of trusting him with her car was a bridge too far. Andre didn't have time for this. He rolled his eyes. "Lady, if I wanted to steal your damn Tesla, I wouldn't do it in the middle of rush hour." That seemed to snap her out of it. With a tight breath, she moved to the driver's seat and pressed the release button. The hood lifted with a quiet hiss. Andre scanned the engine. He wasn't a mechanic, but years of fixing up his own junker had taught him enough to recognize a problem when he saw one. A loose battery terminal. An easy fix. He reached in, fingers working fast. Sweat dripped down his temple as he adjusted the cable, tightening it back into place. The city moved around them, the steady noise of car horns and passing voices dulling into the background. A few minutes later, he stepped back. "Try it now." The woman slid into the driver's seat, pressing the start button. The Tesla rumbled back to life. Relief flickered across her face, but it was quickly masked by her usual steel composure. She turned back to him, looking at him for real this time. "Thank you." Andre wiped his hands on his jeans. "Yeah?" Then he checked the time. 15 minutes late. His stomach sank. The interview was over before it had begun. For a second, he just stood there, staring at the time, feeling the weight of everything slip right through his fingers. Then he turned back to his bike. There was nothing else to do. But before he could start the engine, her voice stopped him. "You were on your way somewhere important," she said. Not a question, a realization. Andre exhaled, shaking his head. Not anymore. Silence. Then, to his complete surprise, she reached into her bag and pulled out a card. She pressed it into his palm before he could protest. "Call me," she said firmly. He barely glanced at the name before stuffing it into his pocket. "I don't need. Just call me." And with that, she stepped into her car, shifted into gear, and disappeared into the flow of traffic. Andre stood there, the street buzzing around him, his future gone in a matter of minutes. A bitter laugh slipped past his lips. He had just thrown away his one shot at something better. Or so he thought. The morning light spilled through the blinds, painting slanted lines across the worn wooden floor. Andre Lawson lay on his bed, one arm draped over his forehead, staring at the cracked ceiling like it held the answer to a question he wasn't sure how to ask. His phone vibrated against the nightstand. He didn't need to look. He already knew. With a slow breath, he reached over, swiping the screen. "Thank you for your application. Unfortunately, we have decided to move forward with other candidates." Andre closed his eyes. He let the weight of the words settle over him, pressing into his chest with the dull familiarity of disappointment. He'd known this was coming. He had missed the interview. He had made his choice. Still, knowing didn't make it any easier to swallow. He tossed the phone onto the bed beside him, exhaling sharply. He needed a new plan. He couldn't afford to sit here wallowing. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and he sure as hell wasn't about to call his mother and tell her he'd screwed up again. His gaze flicked across the nightstand, and that's when he saw it. A small rectangle of thick, expensive cardstock. A business card. Victoria Lennox, CEO. Lennox Company. Andre sat up, card flipping between his fingers. He didn't know why he'd kept it. He told himself he wasn't going to call. He wasn't interested in charity. He wasn't going to grovel for some favor just because he'd changed a damn battery. But as the minutes dragged on, the card felt heavier in his palm, as if daring him to take the risk. His thumb hovered over the number. Then, before he could second-guess himself, he pressed dial. The line barely rang twice before a voice answered. "You called." Andre cleared his throat, suddenly aware of the tightness in his chest. She sounded almost expectant, like she had been waiting. "Yeah," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. You gave me your card." A pause. "Then, did you get the job?" He let out a humorless chuckle. "Didn't make it to the interview." Silence. Then, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, she said, "Come to my office. Now." Andre blinked. "Wait, what?" It wasn't a request. And then she hung up. Andre stared at his phone. What the hell was going on? 20 minutes later, he stood in the towering glass lobby of Lennox Company, shifting uncomfortably under the sharp gaze of the receptionist. He didn't belong here. The marble floors gleamed under fluorescent light, polished to a mirror finish. Men in tailored suits and women in designer heels moved through the space with effortless confidence, barely sparing him a glance. He felt like an outsider before he'd even taken a step. "Name?" the receptionist asked, looking at him over the rim of her designer glasses. Andre Lawson." Her brow furrowed slightly, like the name meant nothing to her. "Do you have an appointment?" "I think so." He wasn't sure what to call whatever this was. Before she could respond, a voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Lawson is expected." Andre turned. A woman in a sleek black suit stood by the elevators, holding a tablet against her chest. Her tone was clipped, professional, and entirely uninterested in pleasantries. "Follow me," she said. Andre hesitated for half a second before stepping in behind her. The elevator ride was silent, the soft chime of the floors passing the only sound between them. Then the doors slid open to the top floor. The office was nothing like the cold, lifeless corporate spaces he had imagined. It was sharp, modern, dominant. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the New York skyline, and the furniture was sleek, every detail intentional. And standing by the window, arms crossed, was Victoria Lennox. She turned as he stepped in, her piercing gaze settling on him like a hawk sizing up its prey. "You came." Andre let out a breath. "Yeah, still not sure why." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit." He did. For a long moment she studied him. Then, finally she spoke. "You saved me yesterday." Andre shifted in his seat. It was just a flat battery. Her expression hardened. "No, it wasn't. It was my career on the line. If I had missed that meeting, it would have cost my company millions. You didn't just fix a car, Andre. You gave me something people in my position rarely get." His brow furrowed. "And what's that?" "A second chance." The words settled between them. Andre leaned back slightly. Was this what this was about? Repaying a favor? He swallowed, shaking his head. "Look, if this is some kind of handout." "It's not." Her voice cut through the space between them like a knife. He hesitated. She leaned forward, folding her hands on the desk. "I have an opening. You're going to take it." Andre blinked. "Wait, you're offering me a job?" "Yes." "But I didn't even interview." "You did yesterday," she countered, "when you chose to help me instead of yourself." Andre stared at her. This was insane. Completely insane. And yet, as she slid a contract across the desk toward him, he realized one thing with startling clarity. His life was about to change forever. Andre stared at the contract in front of him, the weight of the moment pressing down on his chest. His fingers twitched against his knee, his mind racing to catch up. This wasn't how things worked. You didn't just stumble into a meeting with a CEO and walk away with a job. Especially not a man like him, who had spent years fighting to even get a damn interview. He looked up at Victoria, but her expression remained unreadable, sharp green eyes watching him with a patience that felt more like a test. He swallowed hard. "Why?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. "Why would you do this?" She tilted her head slightly, as if the question amused her. "I already told you. You saved me." Andre let out a breath, shaking his head. "That doesn't make sense. It was a car battery. That's not." "It wasn't about the car," she interrupted, her tone clipped, controlled. "It was about the fact that when given the choice between yourself and someone else, you didn't hesitate. You put a stranger first. In this business, people don't do that. They think about what benefits them. You didn't. That's rare." Andre clenched his jaw, glancing down at the contract again. The salary alone was more money than he had ever seen in his life. The title financial associate meant he wouldn't just be some intern fetching coffee. This was a real position, a foot in the door. And yet, something inside him resisted. He leaned forward, his hands pressing into the desk. "I don't want pity." Victoria's lips twitched, almost like she had been expecting that. "This isn't pity." Silence stretched between them, thick and unmoving. She leaned back, crossing her legs. "You have two choices. You can walk out of here, go back to whatever job search you were doing before, and pretend this conversation never happened. Or you can take a chance." Andre's pulse thundered in his ears. Everything in his life had been a struggle. Every job, every opportunity, every damn interview had been an uphill. And now, for the first time, someone was opening a door. Not because of luck, not because of charity, but because of something she saw in him, something that told her he was worth the risk. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for the pen. And then he signed his name. The next morning, Andre stepped into Lennox Company as an employee. It still didn't feel real. The office was a world apart from anything he had ever known: glass walls, polished floors, the low hum of voices discussing figures and forecasts. Everyone moved with purpose, exuding confidence, a sharp contrast to the doubt gnawing at his chest. He had expected to start from the bottom, a cramped cubicle, maybe a desk buried in the back of some overfilled department. But when he was led to his workspace, he stopped short. It wasn't a cubicle. It wasn't even in some forgotten corner. It was a private office. He turned to the woman who had escorted him up, Ava, Victoria's executive assistant, who hadn't spared him more than a cursory glance since he walked through the doors. "There's been a mistake," Andre said, feeling out of place. "I don't think." "No mistake." Ava's tone was curt, her expression impassive. "Miss Lennox made the arrangements herself." That didn't make sense. He hadn't even done anything yet. Before he could question it further, Ava handed him a folder. "Your responsibilities. Read through them. You start immediately." And then she walked out, leaving him standing there, his heart pounding. What the hell had he just gotten himself into? From the moment he stepped into that office, he felt it. The eyes. The whispers. He wasn't supposed to be here. He could feel it in the way people stared, the way conversations dropped just as he passed. They were watching him, judging him. Who is he? Why does he have an office? He doesn't even have experience. Andre clenched his jaw and kept walking, pretending he didn't hear. But the truth was, they were right. He didn't belong here. And the wolves in this office. They could smell weakness. He had to prove himself. Fast. The first real challenge came a few days later. Victoria called him to her office, her expression unreadable as she slid a thick file across the desk. "I need you to prepare a presentation for the executive board," she said, her voice cool and efficient. "They'll be expecting a financial analysis by Friday." Andre felt the blood drain from his face. He barely had any corporate experience, let alone experience presenting to executives. I don't know if I can." "You can," she said sharply, "and you will." This wasn't a favor. This was a test. For the next 3 days, he buried himself in reports, poring over spreadsheets and financial forecasts, trying to make sense of the numbers that felt like a foreign language. He barely slept, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. By the time Friday arrived, he was running on caffeine and nerves. He stepped into the boardroom, facing a table full of powerful executives, men and women, who had built this company from the ground up. The moment he started speaking, he felt it. The skepticism. The silent challenge in their eyes. But he pushed through. He fought through the nerves, the stares, the doubt pressing into his spine like a weight. And when he finished, silence filled the room. Then, one of the older executives leaned back, nodding slowly. "Well done." Andre exhaled, the tension bleeding from his shoulders. He had passed. For now. That evening, Victoria called him into her office. He expected criticism, a breakdown of everything he had done wrong. Instead, she just studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Why didn't you just take the money?" Andre blinked. "What?" "When I gave you my card that day," she said, her voice measured, "I could tell you didn't want a handout. Most people would have taken the money and walked away." Andre clenched his fists. "I don't want charity." Her lips curled slightly. Not quite a smile, but something close. "Good." A pause. Then she leaned forward. "Do you know why I hired you?" He shook his head. "Because you remind me of myself." His heart stopped. She stood, walking to the window, her silhouette outlined against the city skyline. "I built this company from nothing. I know what it's like to have the odds stacked against you, to have to fight for every inch of ground." She turned back, her green eyes locking onto his. "You want to prove yourself," she said, voice quiet but firm. "Then do it." It wasn't encouragement. It wasn't a pep talk. It was a challenge. And Andre wasn't going to back down. The next few weeks were brutal. Andre Lawson had stepped into a shark tank, and every move he made was watched, analyzed, dissected. The whispers had quieted, but the eyes never left him. Every report, every meeting, every decision, they were waiting for him to fail. Victoria Lennox had given him no special treatment. If anything, she was harder on him than anyone else. "Your numbers are weak," she told him one morning, barely glancing up from the report he had spent all night perfecting. She tossed it onto the table between them, the paper skidding to a stop at the edge. Andre gritted his teeth. "I'll fix it." She didn't nod, didn't acknowledge the effort. "You'll fix it by tomorrow." His stomach dropped. Tomorrow. That was impossible. But Victoria never entertained excuses. So he stayed up all night, poring over figures, adjusting projections, making damn sure every decimal, every trend, every forecast was perfect. By the time he handed the revised report back the next morning, his body ached from exhaustion, but his jaw was set. Victoria glanced at the paper, scanned the numbers, then handed it back. "Better." That was it. No praise, no smile, just better. And yet, that single word meant everything. Still, not everyone was content to let him prove himself. One afternoon, Andre walked into a meeting only to realize half of the data in his presentation had been altered. His stomach plummeted. He had checked everything. Triple-checked. Yet the numbers on the screen were wrong, completely off, making his entire analysis look incompetent. A deliberate setup. The executives frowned, their expressions shifting from interest to disappointment. A few exchanged looks. A failure this early. It confirmed their suspicions. He didn't belong here. Andre could feel the blood rushing in his ears, his body tensed like a wire stretched too tight. He had seconds to react. Victoria remained silent, watching. No sympathy. No interference. She was waiting to see if he would sink or swim. Andre inhaled, steadying himself. Then he did what he always had to do. He fought back. He adjusted on the fly, recalculating in real time, pulling numbers from memory, flipping the momentum before it could bury him. He controlled his breathing, controlled his words, willed his voice to stay even as he unraveled the truth behind the flawed data. By the time he finished, he had done more than just recover. He had impressed. One of the senior executives leaned back in his chair, nodding slowly. That was unexpected. Victoria said nothing. But as Andre gathered his notes, his hands no longer shaking, he caught something in her eyes. Approval. Later that evening, she called him into her office. The room was dimly lit, city lights flickering through the windows. "You let your guard down," she said, voice sharp. Andre clenched his fists. "I didn't think." "No," she interrupted. "You didn't." Shame burned in his chest. "Fix it." That's all she said before dismissing him. No sympathy. No second chances. So he spent the next week rebuilding. He stayed late. He double-checked every report. And then he tracked down who had sabotaged him. Jared Montgomery. It wasn't surprising. The man had never hidden his distaste, never bothered to lower his voice when making comments about how not everyone belongs in corporate. But Andre didn't confront him, didn't let the anger win. Instead, he gathered proof, tied it all together, and then, at the next meeting, when the moment was right, he exposed him. Jared was fired. The whispers stopped. No one underestimated him after that. Even Victoria seemed impressed. She didn't say it outright, but he saw the flicker of approval in her eyes, and that was enough. One evening, Andre stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the sleek glass building in front of him, the place where, months ago, he had been meant to walk through those doors, shake hands, and prove himself in a room full of strangers, the job interview that never happened. Back then, he had been a man weighed down by doubt, chasing opportunities that never seemed meant for him. He had been desperate, restless, fighting to be seen in a world that refused to look. But now he stood taller. He carried himself differently. The uncertainty that had once clung to him like a second skin was gone, replaced by something sharper, something stronger. Because of Victoria. Because of that single choice on the side of the road. He never got that job. He got something better. A place where he was more than just a resume in a stack of papers. A life where he was no longer waiting for doors to open, he was stepping through them. With a slow breath, Andre turned away, the city stretching ahead of him, full of possibilities. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.